So you want a realistic, down-to-earth show that's completely off the wall and swarming with magic robots.
That's right.
You can tell any story within the medium of animation, and Cartoon Network's OKKO, Let's Be Heroes, feels like one of the few cartoons that embodies that sense of freedom. It's the type of show that will have a climactic payoff to a season-spanning story arc be one episode apart from a farcical crossover with Sonic the Hedgehog. Across 3 seasons and 112 episodes, it touched on relevant social issues and constructed relatable layered characters, but it did so through ultra-goofy storytelling and a hodgepodge of references to animation and gaming from the past 3 decades. On paper, there's something of a disconnect between the narrative and presentation of this series. It shouldn't work, yet I've loved it since the beginning, and I mean the very beginning. In May 2013, Cartoon Network released 6 pilots online. Some would define the channel for years to come, and others would not do that. For a young lad who had an Adventure Time obsession and a canceled subscription to Nintendo Power, none of the pilots appealed to me more than Lakewood Plaza Turbo, centering around an aspiring young hero who works at a convenience store to defend a strip mall for heroes from evil robots generated by a rival factory across the street. Creator Ian Jones Quirty took influence from his childhood experiences tagging along to his mother's job and growing up and working around Columbia, Maryland. The central location was inspired by the Dobbins Center and Columbia Crossing shopping plazas, the latter of which transformed a picturesque field into a center for big box stores. It was so big that they made a Columbia Crossing too, and this contrasted with the smaller communities on the other side of Route 175. Now, I actually grew up near that area, though this analogy was lost on me, as in my time, choosing between these two meant choosing between Target and Walmart. Still, it was great to see my local area rooted within the origins of this promising pilot. I got just as much of a kick out of references to classic gaming like pro wrestling on the NES,
A wiener is you!
and classic literature like Sonic Chew.
Go, KO! Go out and defend our plaza to the extreme!
Homage and parody were nothing new to me, but it was cool to see something that wore its influences on its sleeve and was just as excited about animation as I was. Compared to what it would become, the characters fit more neatly into archetypes and had much looser silhouettes complete with long skinny noses that would later be referred to with the affectionate nickname of Noodle Snooters. 95% of the side and background cast looks identical to how they would be drawn in the series, and it's amazing to think about how much material the crew would get out of such memorable, mismatched character designs. As simplistic as the Lakewood Plaza Turbo pilot is, considering what would spawn from it, I still commend it for brimming with potential and just being a fun watch all the way through. As this was being created, Ian helped Rebecca Sugar develop some weird show. What was it about again?
Well, there's the fat kid with a thing, the little wiener who's always got his hands in his pocket.
While serving as its supervising director for 3 seasons, he continued to develop Lakewood in his spare time, not as a television series, but as a mobile app. Double Stallion's OKKO Lakewood Plaza Turbo. It's a classic arcade beat-em-up, but it's limited by its touchscreen controls. Today, it's noteworthy for acting as a transition point between the pilot and the show, along with a set of a dozen shorts produced by different studios that tried to nail down the characters and tone. Assisting Ian would be future co-executive producer Toby Jones, a regular show board artist that had his own pilot, AJ's Infinite Summer. It's got a great sense of humor and point of view, so I was excited to see how its qualities would factor into what was already a wacky project. Around this time, Cartoon Network wanted to blur the line between their programming and their mobile games, seen with how Mighty Magiswords started out as a series of interactive shorts and had a tie-in app that fans could use whenever episodes aired on TV. This initiative is a solid explanation for why it took at least 4 years for this concept to get onto the air, as the announcement that Lakewood Plaza Turbo had become a series, now completely retitled OKKO Let's Be Heroes, came with the unveiling of Let's Play Heroes by Cappy Games, a 2D platforming brawler for consoles that reimagines the world in a flashy, circular, and lineless art style. I've yet to have the time to pick it up, but I can appreciate how it strives to be its own thing in a world where licensed video games are becoming more of a rarity. Cheat codes to unlock extra cards for characters were even scattered around the backgrounds of a few episodes, proving OKKO to be filled with lore at every turn, including this sign here that just says lore. Cartoon Network had a decent advertising push ahead of the series premiere in August of 2017. It was the main attraction of their booth at San Diego Comic-Con that year, recreating the central location of Gar's bodega and handing out masks, pens, pins, and patches modeled after props from the show. I got most of this stuff secondhand, because basically no other merch was made for it outside of a DVD, but I'll talk about that at a later date. It's such a missed opportunity that there wasn't a line of blind box figures or trading cards, considering that both were already present within the show itself. I hate how much of a slope it is for cartoons on major networks to get merch nowadays. I mean, I'm glad that we're far from the days of shows being blatant toy commercials, but I just want an easy way to show my love and appreciation for them without having to buy it digitally or make a retrospective video looking at it season by season. Speaking of which, as long of a wait as it was for OKKO to hit the air, I think that all of the time it spent in development paid off. Just as the pilot did, the opening episodes dropped the audience into a world populated by a diverse group of heroes. The difference is that these heroes, and now the villains, are significantly more fleshed out. KO is still working towards his goal of becoming a great hero, but he also has a mysterious darkness within himself that he struggles to control and understand.
See you in my nightmares!
Rad is a macho beefcake, but that's only a facade he puts on to mask his insecurity over his interests.
Brad isn't just some muscular jock. My mind was in a prison, but I know the truth now. Brad is deep.
Enid is snarky and apathetic to the world around her, since she hasn't quite found her place within it.
I'm a witch who wants to be a ninja who maybe wants to be a hero but works at a convenience store. I don't have anything figured out.
The focus of each episode always comes back to the characters, peeling back the layers of their fears, pasts, and personalities. Just about every single background character is able to make an impact, whether in their own spotlight episode or specific appearances that paint their lives in a somewhat unusual light. I can imagine this being the main appeal of the show for some people, as the ability to make me want to see more of a character that we know nothing about besides that he calls himself Gerald Nametag is quite a powerful one.
Is this the end of Gerald Nametag?
Nope.
I think the first dozen episodes or so do a great job setting the scene for what's to come, but during this rewatch, I could not get over all the little inconsistencies that were tweaked in the rest of the series. At first, the lighting was all over the place, sometimes being saturated or having a tinted hue. As I guessed in my old first impressions video, that aspect did eventually sort itself out. KO swaps between two different voice actresses up until a quarter of the way through the season, and hearing Stephanie Nandoli's slightly raspier take on the character after being accustomed to Courtney Taylor's performance for years was so jarring to me after a little while. If the swap had happened elsewhere in the series run, I can assure you that there would have been a gag, or even a one-off episode about this change, similar to what Gumball did a few times. Jim Cummings' early version of the villain Lord Boxman was basically him channeling the version of Dr. Robotnik that he voiced for the Saturday morning Sonic cartoon. Fitting, considering that he's a pretty blatant knockoff of the character, even right down to the cybernetic elements in his design. Initially, Boxman would show small signs of being a petty villain, but it didn't take very long for his wackiness to be turned up to 11. He would still prove himself to be a competent antagonist, but I think he's at his best when pining for the respect of superior villain Professor Venomous. There's absolutely no line that Boxman won't cross for this guy's validation. And yeah, it's pretty easy to read between the lines here. I was always just as excited to see what the villains would get up to as I was with the heroes, and Lord Boxman ranks among some of my favorite loser villains in animation.
The Roboti Makey Machine. You'll never guess what it does.
Does it make robots?
About 26 episodes in, we meet Turbo KO, the dark manifestation of KO's negative emotions. He's introduced as a cross between an edgy teen and a dark doppelganger, but I like how he evolved into less of an evil version of KO and more of an independent anti-hero trapped inside of him.
You know I'm always willing to support your choices, but this phase has gone too far! It's not a phase, Mom!
After his introduction in a strong two-parter, Season 1 takes its attention away from stories focused mainly on character development. There's one dedicated to defending furry culture, one where the cast watches the pilot as if they're actors who play characters on the show, and one where Rad and Enid make fun of KO's 18-minute-long countdown video. Crazy stuff, right? Keeping the plot going are episodes that flash back 6 to 11 years in the past, back when KO's mom Carol and Mr. Gar were members of an elite superhero team called Point. right before a traumatic event tore the two apart. With the help of Dendy, KO also makes an effort to control his new transformation, and I'm glad to see a major development like this being frequently touched on instead of being left to be resolved in the season finale. I liked the second half of Season 1 a lot, but I found it to be the weaker part for episodes that had little to do with fleshing out the universe to some extent. On a few occasions, that laser-like focus on characters felt like it was dropped in favor of some gimmick or message, but there's only a few episodes that don't get my full recommendation. Until now, Face Your Fears was my favorite from Season 1, as it gave critical development to 4 separate characters while still having an exciting amount of variety. But I've come around to love Back in Red Action. It establishes a compelling personality and backstory for a character who was previously just a cool-looking grumpy teen in 11 compelling minutes, and has storytelling and visuals that are just as cool. I previously ranted and raved about why I find Let's Not Be Skeletons to be this season's worst, but right now I just can't get over how Mr. Gar is referred to as Daddy.
Tommy's pickles, laser forks, shaving beams, oh God! Easy, Daddy. Where's the fire?
This disturbs me on a deep emotional level. One thing I give OKKO a lot of credit for is going above what is expected with its presentation. You can easily find the production code for each episode underneath their title card. Supervising animation director Kimson Albert is credited with a unique nickname pulled from an episode quote. The ending tag recreates Hanna-Barbera's production logo from the late 90s, sound effects and all. The credits that pay tribute to Space Patrol Luluco feature different characters and live-action locales, although every now and then, there's a special change. Even though the average viewer probably won't even watch the credits, they still remain unique aspects of each episode, and they're accompanied by Rebecca Sugar's soothing but satisfying fourth wall-breaking ending theme. On that literal note, I really dig the soundtrack by Shovel Knight game composer Jake Kaufman and his studio Mint Potion. Many of the motifs are driven by disco, a movement that symbolizes people from different places in society coming together. It sums up the themes of friendship and teamwork, and is probably the main reason why a disco ball is the first thing that you see at the start of each episode. This triumphantly funky score merges with the music of what influenced the spirit of the show, creating a sound that can greatly differ from cue to cue, but one that always comes back to its disco roots. And that consistency makes it stand out amongst most animated soundtracks. I'm extraordinarily happy that the OST for over 30 episodes have been officially released online as of this video, alongside loads of models and concept art on the official crew Tumblr vlog, the latter of which might be rather eye-opening for those on the fence about the visuals of this series. A philosophy ingrained into the look of OKKO is the idea that if a drawing from a storyboard made the crew laugh, it would usually be retained in the final product, even if it wasn't technically on model. There's a misconception that the series has lazy animation because it doesn't use model sheets, documents that define the look and proportions of a character to keep their look consistent, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. In order to stay loyal to the rough storyboards, more special model sheets need to be created, meaning that more needs to be designed compared to the average animated production. At least that's what I know from the limited amount of information I have on this subject. I respect the amount of effort put in to give the impression that each frame was drawn by hand, and keep the little nuances that cover how each board artist draws the characters. The moment it begins, I can always tell when an episode was boarded by the team of Dave Allegre and Haewon Lee, just because their slightly grotesque or exaggerated styles are so distinct. I think the round and geometric character designs make them very fit for wacky expressions, ones that blend together with the action sequences fairly well.
Time to bring the damage.
Sorry, Mr. Chippy.
Nice.
The art direction makes OKKO different from its contemporaries, but I understand that others may find its staging to be amateurish, or that it overuses its wacky expressions and barely ever brings things down a notch. I believe both of these criticisms to be valid, but they barely cross my mind when I'm watching an episode. If the dialogue isn't making me laugh, the animation usually is. So I can give it a pass, even if it might not be the best on an objective level. Maybe not every episode looked as great as it could have been, but when it makes an effort to pull out all of the stops, its animation can be especially outstanding. That's without even mentioning the intro, which was storyboarded by a co-founder of Studio Trigger. It's so quick and detailed that it has to be slowed down in Japan over fears of it causing seizures. 2 decades after the infamous Pokemon shock crisis. Like any good opening should, it immediately catches your eye and brings you into this world. And the world of OKKO would only expand in the following season.
There's an daddy in town.
The mission statement for this season is made crystal clear in its premiere. There won't be any major revisions to the show you know and hopefully love, but in the background, the gears are continuing to turn. The first half of this season continues to give side characters their time in the sun and provide sequel episodes to traits of the main trio. One complaint I saw early on was that the universe felt too small. Now, I think this was a deliberate decision to show how many heroes can be found in KO's local community before moving on to introduce more major heroes. But I understand where this criticism comes from. Nearly every episode of Season 1 primarily took place in the Plaza. It wasn't until 39 episodes in that we got to see what KO's house looks like. Season 2 makes a conscious effort to remedy this, with a couple episodes taking place in the Danger Zone, Lakewood Public School, the Glorb Sanctuary, and even a dedicated 5-episode arc at the Hero Academy Point Prep. We see how the school operates their initiation, day-to-day lectures, sporting events, honors program, and final exams. Its structure and tone reminds me a lot of early Harry Potter, although here, it only feels like Enid is at Point Prep for a week instead of a whole semester. That's just a nitpick to what is otherwise a refreshing change of pace, filled with reunions and challenges for Enid, and even its own credits screen. It's after this arc that we get knee-deep into this series' take on crossovers. Crossover Nexus unites 4 heroes from 4 of Cartoon Network's current hits in a massive tribute to nearly every show in the channel's history. The guest protagonists don't translate into OKKO's art style especially well, and dozens of references overshadow how simplistic the plot is, due to it originally being a 22-minute special. To many, this episode was their first exposure to OKKO, and it's led some to write the whole show off as being nothing but references, but Crossover Nexus is the exception to the rule. You can understand practically all of the series without even knowing that any given thing is a reference. In the early episodes, a key plot point is cemented with a flashback done in the same style as the first scene of Cowboy Bebop. And at first it's like, that's the thing I know, but with a sandwich! But then, when its significance is finally revealed and it turns out to be semi-tragic, the initial reference actually has some weight to it. When it comes to the crossovers, one of them is foreshadowed several times and is linked to Enid's character arc. Monster Party reveals that her classmates were students from Ghoul School, characters from a late 80s direct-to-video Scooby-Doo movie, which is known today for featuring the elusive Red Shirt Shaggy. It's a bold move to give so much focus to something only the most hardcore Scoober-Doober-Doo fans would know, but they all feel like old friends, and naturally slide into their new roles.
Hey, do you guys ever wonder what happened to that weird guy with the Great Dane? Oh yeah!
Talk like so weird, man.
Enid's struggle of being afraid to reveal that she's now a witch and no longer a vampire is a not-so-subtle metaphor for coming out to your friends. And that itself is more interesting than most Scooby parodies and homages on TV. I never need to see another variation of the door chase sequence again. A lot of these references serve as intertextuality for the stories, but the references themselves are never a substitute for the story. There's also loads of brief shoutouts to random media in addition to this, but tons of other cartoons have these too. I never see The Amazing World of Gumball being scrutinized for having long Cowboy Bebop references, and it's also got arcs and moments that are just as zany or serious as what OKKO is trying to do. I've always thought these references to be the creators just showing their respect for what inspired them, and I don't think there's anything wrong with— is that a JoJo reference during a Captain Planet crossover? For our heroes, Season 2 is business as usual, but Boxmore has fallen under new management. Lord Boxman's robot son Daryl kicks his father out of the company, leading the bumbling mad scientist to team up with Professor Venomous to buy back Boxmore and combine their business ventures. I enjoyed the 3 episodes that directly cover these events, but those that surround them are just okay. This plays out like it's really switching up the status quo, yet it barely impacts the interactions that the Boxbots have with our heroes.
And we were very excited about debuting Jethro's new sound system.
I am Jethro.
I hate it.
A good chunk of these episodes could have taken place during Season 1, and I wouldn't have known the difference. We don't even get a proper resolution to Daryl's relationship with Boxman after he returns to the company with Venomous by his side. After the Point Prep arc, Season 2 delves back into the well of wackiness to deliver a Yu-Gi-Oh! Parody episode, an alternate universe episode, and a beach episode. That one's called Beach Episode. Like the second half of Season 1, plot and character-centric episodes are still here. But there's more stuff like Plaza Alone, which has 2 minutes of utter nonsense that I find completely hilarious.
It's my birthday!
I consider this part of the season somewhat of a low point, but that's because the worst thing that I can say about it is that I find some of its episodes rather underwhelming. I couldn't find much to like in Brad's Alien Sickness. It's just a tad gross and doesn't go anywhere, but it's not something that I would ever have an iota of true hatred for. I think Season 1 was better as a complete experience, but Season 2 has higher highs.
Well, that's just not right!
I don't know how many kids will laugh at this joke about camera staging, but this stuff here, this is the exact reason why I watch. Upon further analysis, TKO's House now holds the honor of being my Season 2 favorite, as the gags, development, and visuals are some of the show's best all the way through. A good episode made better by a great execution. A close second would be the season finale Dark Plaza, which successfully proves that the show can be a little darker and a little more plot-driven while still retaining all of its charm. After all that KO, Rad, and Enid do for their Plaza here, they've proven themselves to be great heroes and are ready to take on all new challenges in the third and final season. Wait, it's the final season? How could Cartoon Network cancel OKKO after only 2 years, even though fans had been waiting twice as long for it? Was it because people didn't spread the word about it enough online? Maybe it's because only 25 episodes premiered on TV, and all of the others were first available on Cartoon Network's app that no one uses. I would have loved to see this series go on for 1,000 episodes, just to see more random stuff, like, I don't know, Weird Al visit the Plaza. He wouldn't have to play a character or anything, he would just need to show up. You know, things like that. There were some actual crossovers planned that didn't come to be, with Space Ghost and Ooh La La of Space Channel 5. The former did have a few direct audio references, along with many other Hanna-Barbera sound effects used throughout.
Bodegaman!
Back on topic, with Season 3, the creators were given 20 episodes to finish the story and tie up all of their loose ends. This brought the total number of episodes up to a respectable 112, and gives the series a definite beginning, middle, and end, with a nearly consistent quality across the board. I think it's better that the series was able to end before it lost its touch, and if it had to end here, I'm very happy about the way that it was all executed. Since this season is only 2 months old, I'll do my best to avoid discussing spoilers, but this one is definitely my favorite of the 3.
We're here to show you a new game we just made up. We pull up a random photo on your phone and we decide if it's cool
Or lame.
like this. Cool.
Lame. Cool.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Keck or Cringe.
Now more than ever, there's confidence and purpose behind every story that is told, building to a conclusion in a way that feels densely plotted, but never rushed. Towards the end, there probably should have been an extra episode or two to help the series adjust to a major shakeup, but I probably wouldn't have changed any of their subject matter. A lot of foreshadowing is paid off here, whether it was intentional or not, and the same can be said about the Sonic crossover. I love that OKKO got to do an episode with one of its biggest inspirations. Ian JQ sure has come a long way from posting Tails Gets Trolled fan art on Tumblr. Although this is another reference fest, it specifically pays its due to the Sonic franchise's animated representation in the 90s, a facet that Sega rarely acknowledges today. I think Sonic and Tails have seen better days visually, but you don't need to know a thing about them to enjoy this breather episode within the show's darkest season.
Just where has a man of damage gone to?
I'll tell you where he is. 6 feet under.
No, I mean that it literally is the darkest, as the color palette and coloring have changed to make the characters stand out against the backgrounds. It almost feels like I'm standing in a field, because look at all that grain! This effect was semi-distracting at first, along with how half the cast wears eyeshadow now, but I got used to it the more I watched. It can add some nice texture to the world, and it's neat that they swap back to the old style when revisiting previous events. It goes to show how far the action and posing have come in just a few years. It became harder and harder for me to find a least favorite episode as I went through this show, because for this season, I'm going with Deep Space Vacation. I like the motorcycle fight and intergalactic atmosphere, but the message that some things will just naturally work themselves out isn't the strongest to conclude an episode with. The conflict also revolves around an entire planet getting bored, so keep that in mind too. My personal highlight was Let's Get Shadowy. Such a rewarding roundup of side characters and surprising team-ups and twists make it a great answer to one of the series' biggest mysteries. As for the final 2 episodes, Let's Fight Till the End has more heavy lifting to do and pulls it off with a few conveniences and quick resolutions, but I think its spectacle, surprises, and follow-up make up for it where it falters. Pretty much every single loose thread was tied up, even the ones that barely had any time to be established beforehand. This especially rings true of Thank You for Watching the Show, which crams in seasons worth of new ideas into 11 minutes, but all of it takes further steps to conclude the series. Some of it is fan service at its purest form, but everything that made the show great is intact, so it feels genuinely satisfying and less like checking off a laundry list of characters and resolutions. I understand the complaint that too much was answered too quickly, and not enough was left up to the imagination, similar to how Harry Potter fans feel about the final moments of that franchise. Because the future of the cast is only shown to us in glimpses and is underlined by a mature message, it feels like there's still so much to explore. You can also read into it as an argument for why the series never should have been canceled in the first place, but I see it as an explanation for why OKKO Let's Be Heroes was able to juggle so many radically different tones and elements at once. You guessed it, teamwork. Every artist approached this show a little differently, but each of their ideas was blended with another's, creating a product that's so much greater than the sum of its parts. If you're gonna make a cartoon, you might as well go all out. And that mentality was brought to nearly every aspect of this production. While I know that it won't be everyone's cup of tea, it's already joined the ranks of Chowder and Clarence in becoming a Cartoon Network cult classic. And this is exactly the type of show that I would love to have a hand in making someday. Not only can its impact already be seen throughout the entire animation industry, but it's also inspired some of what I do here. Like, it's part of the reason why I always try to thank my audience at the end of each video I create and pronounce sorry the way that I do. Its tongue-in-cheek, upbeat, and sincere attitude is truly infectious. I love and appreciate how supportive the crew behind it have been of the fanbase it's helped to inspire, including loyal and vocal fans like me. It's not too often that you see a show launch alongside a crew-endorsed OC template, and that is a perfect extension of the message that's been behind OKKO Let's Be Heroes from the very beginning. You can be a hero. We can be heroes. So, let's be heroes.